This paper focuses on conference interpreting, also known as simultaneous interpretation, its history and the techniques used. First of all, simultaneous interpretation consists in transposing a speech to language A starting from language B. Language A is called active and is generally the mother tongue. Language B, on the other hand, is called passive. The interpreter understands it perfectly, but not at a level that can be interpreted towards it. In ancient times, interpretation was not considered a profession, but an innate skill. The first evidence dates back to 3000 BC and was found on an inscription of the tomb of the Princess of Elephantine, an island in the Nile. Until the Middle Ages, the information on the use of interpretation was fragmentary, but it was during the age of the great explorations that the interest in foreign languages increased. From Christopher Columbus to Hernan Cortés, the great explorers used interpreters during their travels, and very often they were the native themselves. As the figure of the interpreter became defined, he became more and more involved in state affairs. At the end of World War II, the Allies created the International Military Tribunal to quickly try those accused of Nazi war crimes. This led to the acceleration of translations of the 4 languages of the nations involved, namely English, German, French, and Russian. The solution to the language problem was devised by Colonel Leon Doster, who consulted IBM to develop a system of microphones and headsets. After the end of the process, simultaneous interpretation spread to various sectors and became more and more popular in sectors and is now the most widespread form of interpretation. To be a good interpreter, it is not enough to speak 2 languages well. He must also master the art of interpretation, be always updated on what is happening in the world, and frequently practice the techniques of interpretation. For these reasons, there are several exercises that an interpreter has to do to keep his mind constantly trained. Among the most common, sight translation, which is the oral translation into language A of a text, viewed for the first time, written in language B. A second exercise is reading much about any topic. In this way, an interpreter can always be informed on the latest discoveries or innovations, because to be a good interpreter, one has to know a bit of everything. Another very useful exercise is writing glossaries with all the words you don't know. Each subject has its own sector-specific language, and it is not possible for an interpreter to know them all. Watching movies and TV series is another exercise which is very useful to develop listening and analysis skills, which are fundamental for an interpreter. During the listening part, in fact, an interpreter puts into practice the split attention, which is the ability to be able to do 4 activities at the same time. While listening, he must be able to understand and analyze the message, and then give it back, listening to himself. Before facing a simultaneous interpretation working session, an interpreter must acquire an adequate preparation. The first thing to do is know the theme of the conference and read documents and articles related to the topic. Then, write a glossary and focus on the terminological work, memorizing as many words as possible. Any consultation of the glossary should be quick and limited due to the little time available. During a work session, the interpreter is in a soundproof booth where there is a console equipped with headsets and microphones. Usually, he works in pairs and each booth is reserved for a language combination. One of the most frequently asked questions to interpreters is certainly, what do you do if you don't understand something about a speech? An interpreter does not need to understand every word of a speech, but must be able to understand and translate the ideas that the speaker wants to express. Simultaneous interpretation has 4 phases. The first is listening, where the interpreter must put split attention into practice. The second is the understanding phase. Then the analysis phase that promotes understanding. The last phase is the re-elaboration, a kind of reformulation of the original speech. In short, simultaneous interpretation is a very complex technique. It involves a great mental effort that does not allow moments of deconcentration. Compared to the past, I think there are several reasons today why people choose a career as an interpreter, but the first is undoubtedly their passion for foreign languages, and for me, helping people communicate is a really satisfying experience.